And hello, everyone. Looky, look who's here. It's the top men. I am Elliott Serrano, joined by Jon Clarke, Dave Pinto, and Thomas Juettner. Welcome to this Memorial Day edition of Top Men, an Indiana Jones podcast where we're talking about the Indiana Jones movies, beginning with Raiders of the Lost Ark, concluding with Dial of Destiny, which it's my understanding that's it. Indiana Jones disappears at that point. He no longer exists. Poof, gone. From what I understand, is that what you've heard, John?
Yeah, Harrison Ford is telling people in no uncertain terms that he is done. And from the judging at Cannes, it sounds like everyone else will be done. And that's the thing I don't get about Cannes is every film I'm reading, they're timing the standing ovations. They're like, oh, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, it only got a 5-minute standing ovation at Cannes. Like, I remember when standing ovation was the A+ of audience response. You know how many times I got a standing ovation? Like 3.
Sounds like this one got like an obligatory one, not one that it actually earned.
Yeah, I guess the standing ovation in Cannes, Dave, must be like clapping for every kid at a graduation. Like, I don't know that kid was mean to my kid.
Well, yes, and of course the interwebs are all full of everyone's hot takes about a movie that hasn't even been released yet. I was scrolling through YouTube to look at some of my regular subscriptions. I saw one YouTube video that said Indiana Jones 5 is the nail in Lucasfilm's coffin, the final nail in Lucasfilm's coffin. I'm like, what? And I would say, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I'm going to ignore it. Yet that video already ranked up 1.9 million views.
Yeah, that's all right. I saw a YouTube video today that says why all the guitars you think are good are bad. That it's a formula on YouTube to go, things are bad, click here. That and having a YouTube host going like this. That's the thumbnail on every review on everything.
I want to do some reaction videos on all the reaction videos. So that's probably what we'll be doing next. Just the reactions to all the other reactions, again, for a movie that has not been released yet. Well, anyway, welcome everyone who's watching live on our Facebook page. Thank you. Hello, Ash Williams, Joe Biden. Yes, our theme couldn't get some more cowbell. John, add more cowbell to the theme. Susan, thank you so much for tuning in as you do each and every week, whether it's for Top Men or the MCU review. We appreciate that. Thank you to everyone who's watching us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch TV. Let's throw a hot take in here real quick, just since we're here. Yes, ND5 rips off Futurama. He is his own grandfather. We'll see if that actually happens. But yes, we're here to talk about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which for many people, it was the last Indiana Jones movie. It was like, that was it. That's when the franchise ended for them. They didn't, after that, no other Indy movies occurred, which I find hilarious. Although, I kind of relate on a certain level, because for me, the Alien franchise ended after Aliens.
The Terminator franchise ended after 2.
After Terminator 2, yes. So you just had like maybe 2-3 movies tops, and then bam, that's it for the franchise. And nothing else really occurred after that. But today we will be talking about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. For those who've never watched our shows before, whether it is Top Men or the MCU review, what we do is we talk about a film that has come out in the past, and in many cases we will re-watch the movie to compare how the most recent watching of the film does in relation to the first time we saw the film. And if not that, at least give our own recollections of what the film meant to us when we first saw it. And we've been doing this with the we started doing this with the James Bond films, and I've got to say that doing Shaken Not Heard with Dave Pinto down there really gave me a sense of perspective, because I see a lot of the criticisms that have been made of the Indiana Jones films. I saw leveled at many of the Bond films too. So that, and I think when you really look at franchises in general, there aren't that many really franchise series films going today. I'm right now. What's going now? The John Wick movies, right? That would be the next one up. That's happening. They keep trying to start other ones. The Bourne Identity movies only could go so far. But we'll also discuss what's been going on. Why we've only gotten 5 Indiana Jones films in how many years? 40?
40 years.
Yeah, 40 years. Yeah.
We've gotten 10 Fast and the Furious movies in half that time.
So my question is, would you want 10 Indiana Jones movies if they were of the same level of quality as the Fast and Furious films?
I feel like
Fast and Furious 90s output was the quality of the Fast and Furious films. Just every movie where he tried to get back his family, you could switch him out for Vin Diesel in those. Vin Diesel needs his family back. Fine. It makes just as much money.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that. Okay. So let us kick off with what we call our 2-minute indie movie review, where each of our panelists here will give a 2-minute summary of what they felt about the topic of the evening. Again, you don't have to give us an entire rundown of the movie. Just what'd you think about it? What do you
so it's clear?
Yes. What'd you think about it? And what did you feel? And of course, if you're watching here on the live stream, feel free to chime in with your own perspective. We read all comments. And if you're watching this as part of rebroadcast on our archive page or as part of the Radio Misfits podcast network, you can always let us know on our respective Facebook pages what you thought. Okay, let's lead off with you, Dave.
All right. This is my favorite indie movie. I think I don't want to. I'm probably repeating myself. Tom and I think have the same view on this. That Raiders is probably the best, but this is my favorite. Just like how Sean Connery is the best James Bond, but he's not my favorite. Like I can acknowledge when something is the best, almost objectively the best, but not my personal favorite. So this is such a fun movie. I think it strikes that sweet spot between sort of it's a light, breezy action adventure without getting into like silly territory. There are silly moments, but good silly, not like roll your eyes at those moments type silly. And of course, I have to say the presence of Sean Connery gives this movie a very unfair advantage over the other 4 films in the series. So having James Bond be the father of Indiana Jones, character that was very obviously inspired by James Bond, was some of the most perfect casting of all time. And this is, as we talked about, Elliot, in the past, there's a lot of Bond influence in the whole franchise, but I think it's especially felt in this one. There are a lot of Bond actors in this film. Connery being the obvious one. Alison Doody had a small part, almost a blink and you miss it part in A View to a Kill, 1985. John Rhys-Davies, of course, was in The Living Daylights as Pushkin. Julian Glover was the villain, Christatos, in For Your Eyes Only. So a lot of 1980s Roger Moore and Timothy Dalton era Bond actors in these films, but especially in this movie. And of course, we talked about the boat chase, feels straight out of From Russia with Love. Just a lot of really inventive action sequences. I love the whole flashback sequence in the beginning where you see kind of how Indy becomes Indy, the scar on his chin and how he kind of adopts the look and gets the whip and all that. I feel like a lot of movies nowadays tend to do that kind of stuff, but it's a lot more heavy-handed and almost they take it too seriously, where this is just like, okay, we're going to show you right in the beginning in a few minutes kind of the origin of Indiana Jones, and just jump right into the present, and not have that be the focal point of the whole movie. Just sort of like a little nice little Easter egg for the fans. So yeah, this is my favorite of the whole series, and based on what I've heard about Dial of Destiny, I don't think that's going to change after next month.
Don't listen to the French, Dave. Don't they have their issues, right? Tom.
Well, Dave stole a lot of my thunder there. Same deal. I think there might be a generational thing of like when you were able to watch this movie on TV, because this is also I recognize that Raiders is the best, but this is my favorite. And this movie gets a lot of father-son dynamic really well that other movies kind of miss, in the sense that they're the same person but not the same person, or how else to explain it? There's a lot that they have in common, but they're very clearly different. And that love and warmth, but also tension, because of years of the conversations that they had. The conversation that they have on the blimp is just, it's very relatable in terms of trying to connect with a parent and thinking, well, what are we going to talk about? I don't know. I can't think of anything. So that's all great. I think this might be John Williams' best work in the series. I love that they have the Nazis have their own theme. It's almost like an Imperial March type of thing, where it's villainous, but also stupid and pompous. The way fascists are stupid and pompous. And the Grail theme, or I guess I should call it the Crusader theme, is one of my favorites. Something about that. I actually took a course on the Crusades when I was in college, and so I'm kind of like focused on that a little bit. The rewatch, kind of watching it a second time with a closer eye on that. For the record, the Crusades were awful. They seem to have gotten these knights, these three brothers, on the first crusade, but before they got to Jerusalem, which is emphatically a good thing for their for their souls. And it also goes hand in hand with that was very much the early 12th century was kind of the height of romantic myths about chivalry and the quest for the Holy Grail and things like that through the Arthurian legend. That was the kind of the golden age of troubadours. So kind of framing this as like of the story of like knights and things like that, or a knight errant, makes a lot of sense. And I thought that was a great angle to take. Little details like if you caught the bringing of the 4 columns back to Venice from Byzantium, that's a direct reference to the Fourth Crusade, where the Crusaders were supposed to go off and take the city of Damietta in Egypt, but decided to waylay in Venice and just waylay from Venice to Constantinople, which was a Christian city at the time, and just sack it and loot it and effectively kill the last remnant of the Roman Empire. So one of the more terrible events in human history is noted mildly in this movie. So there's a lot of history in this. I'm going to get into it in more detail when we get to the drink of the evening, but there's a lot of interesting history. I think the knight is a great character when we finally get to the end of the movie. That's a great insertion at the end. Julian Glover is just great, slimy, very much kind of the quasi-Nazi sympathizer you did get in America in the late 1930s. That's a very appropriate character. If you do a little bit of digging into the history of American politics and the America First movement in the late 1930s and early 1940s. So it's great. It's a great movie. There's a lot of the details are on point. Also, I want to give a particularly bit of love to Indy being a life scout at the time when it was done, down to having the right rank insignia on his chest. So great little detail there. And that I'm going to go on and on about this movie, but I'm going to stop right there.
All right, and then John.
Yeah, this movie's all about course correction. As we were talking about with Temple of Doom, it had gotten very dark, and it had caused the MPAA to review how movies were rated. It was so dark, and there seems to be trying to swing it in the other direction and break down what was the formula of raters and how did that work. And you can see the formula being laid out. The formula of raters being laid out here, but at every step making it lighter, making it more fun. You know, you have the cold open is young Indy instead of Indy on a separate adventure. You have the double MacGuffin, which Raiders does so well. The first hour, everyone's trying to get this headpiece of the Wrath Staff Ra. Once you have that, it unlocks where to get the Ark. Now everybody wants the Ark. This movie, you have the diary. The Grail diary is the MacGuffin, and that leads you to get the Grail. It has that same kind of 1 hour, 2 hour, but at every moment, like, let's make it lighter. I mean, let's make it more fun. So it is, which is why it's my second favorite, because I think it becomes so light that the stakes feel lower. And I was listening to an interview with Steven Spielberg talking about his work, and he said all of my great works come out of fear. He's like, all of my great movies, I was completely stressed out, neurotic, and I thought it wouldn't work. He goes, and that's why none of my sequels are as good. because as I made those, I go, well, this will do well. So he wouldn't stress as much on it. And you can feel that in this movie. This is a movie that was made for the fun of it. And it is really fun. And there's some great classic moments. And it's my second favorite of the five. The interesting thing, going back to when it came out, it had been 5 years since Temple of Doom, and that seems ludicrously short compared to what the franchise would do later. But I remember when that film came out, it was like, there was this feeling of like, oh my God, Indiana Jones still exists, because I was in such a different part. And screw you, Tom, for saying, how young were you when you first saw this on television? I saw this with girls. I saw this after finals twice. That's how old I am.
Was it at least a date? Do you have the dignity of a?
No, it was like all the guys and all the girls going, and you stared at the girl you liked, and nobody did anything about it. We were that young. but I remember feeling
26.
Yeah, I remember feeling in this movie, I was like, wow, I'm in a different part of my life than I was when I had seen Raiders, and so is Indy. And looking ahead, it's like, oh God, the next two movies are going to be in a completely different time of my life.
It's funny that as I was watching this one, and it's very much, I mean, let's be honest, the theme, and Spielberg himself has said it, it's not Indy looking for the Holy Grail, it's Indy looking for his father. He's trying to get his father back. The thing, the nut that they had to crack on this to break the story for Indy 3 for the longest time was, one, where was Indy's motivation? And two, how do you come up with a nice opening sequence a la the Bond films, where it was something that really related to the movie that helped advance the story forward? And for the longest time, they couldn't break that part of the story. If you look at the credits to the film, the story credit goes to George Lucas and Menno Meyjes, who is actually credited for coming up with the opening young Indiana Jones sequence. They were the one who said, hey, why don't we do this whole bit where, we see Indy on his first adventure and where we introduce all these different.
I didn't realize that, because I remember that the screenplay was written by Jeffrey Boehm, and yes. Jeffrey Boehm went on to create The Adventures of Briscoe County. So I always thought Young Indy was his, that kind of Western, really light, really bouncy feel.
He would also do the Phantom.
On him.
Yeah, before he passed away too, he would go on to do the Phantom, and incorporate a lot of different elements there too. But yeah, Jeffrey Boehm would do the screenplay, and go on to The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. with Carlton Cuse, who, if you ask me, is the one who really made the first season of Jack Ryan work.
Well, he also made Lost work.
He made Lost work too, right?
Yeah, it was when you see Damon Lindelof's other work, you see, Carlton Cuse was hired to sit on this young kid.
Yeah,
because Carlton Cuse has that kind of like old Hollywood. This is the structure.
Yeah, so the movie really was about Indy finding his father, which is a theme that, of course, Spielberg would talk about in making the film, because he was always coming up with ways of reconciling with his father
and his other films. He's saying now that he's made The Fabelmans, he's realizing how much it's about lost fathers.
Yep.
E.T., the dad is gone. Close Encounters, that Richard Dreyfuss leaves his family.
Yep.
It's always it's always about absent fathers. And in fact, Lucas didn't like the father angle. Lucas liked the Holy Grail, but he thought the father angle was going to be cheesy. And that's the whole heart of the film.
He also didn't like the joke about she talks in her sleep, which apparently they came up with on the set. And when Lucas heard it later, not happy. Anyway, so let's but I would echo what you guys have said. And yes, Last Crusade, not my favorite. Of course, Raiders will always be my favorite. But I do rank. I rank the Indy movies in the order that they were released. I love Temple of Doom more and more every time I see it.
And you like it more than this?
Yeah. And then with Last Crusade, see, to me, I remember when I saw Last Crusade in the theater for the first time, the movie hinges on the relationship between Indy and Henry, between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery. There is so much mugging for the camera that Harrison Ford does, doing little reaction shots, playing off of Sean Connery. It's all that. If that doesn't work, the movie doesn't work. And luckily, it does work. It also helps, as we are discovering more and more now, Harrison Ford's a very talented comedic actor. So he's really good at, setting up a joke, playing it.
Well, he's a great straight man. I mean, Empire Strikes Back is all reaction takes.
Yes.
And let's not forget, Sean Connery turned down Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, to make this. So whatever his capacities were at the end of his life, he was dead on in 1989. William Shatner named the planet Shakari to try to get him to take it. And he still was like, nope.
Well, just to ape a line from the movie, he chose wisely. Now, before we get too much more into our movie talk, why don't we talk a little bit about our feature drink created by our own Thomas Juettner. The drink that he created for this particular film. Let me hit this here. If you're watching us on the live stream, you can see the image I'm going to put up right now. If you're listening to the show as part of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network, you can always check out Review Cocktails. That's REVU Cocktails to see all the themed cocktails that our own Thomas Juettner creates for our discussions. Tom, tell us about today's Last Crusade themed drink.
Well, I really like the idea of centering this on Venice. It's the kind of where we've kind of first begin the real adventure part of the movie. And there are so many great aperitifs and cocktails that come out of Venice. So most famous of which is the Aperol Spritz. So that kind of seemed to me to be a good place to start. It's light. It's something you have at the beginning of the meal, and Venice is where is our beginning portion of the movie. So I thought that was a good place to start, and I think we've established that Indy's favorite spirit is whiskey. So I kind of went in the direction of going with a Boulevardier. A Boulevardier is one of the many riffs off of the Negroni, where instead of Gin, you use bourbon or rye whiskey. And I tweaked that by going with Aperol. And I think Aperol is the main ingredient in the spritz, which was made famous by Venice. It's also sweeter than Campari, so I had to switch from sweet vermouth to dry vermouth. And I thought that worked out pretty well. Now, since this is a riff on a boulevardier, there's no boulevards in Venice. It's all canals. So you could call this a gondolier. That would be one way to putting this. But in naming this, when we first meet Elsa, when Indy first arrives in Venice, they walk over a bridge on the way to the library that used to be a church. And that isn't any old bridge. You can see how it's not very wide, and it's not very long, and it looks like any other bridges in Venice. But that is the Ponte dei Pugni, or also known as the Bridge of San Barnaba. And that was one of the famous locations for what were called the battagliole, which were these massive organized fistfights that the working class of Venice would put on for their own amusement during the early modern period, with hundreds, if not thousands, of individual fighters and set portions, individual one-on-one boxing matches, almost rugby-like scrums, and then all-out free-for-alls with dozens of men punching each other for control of a bridge. It's just a fascinating little part of Venetian history, and they happen to be walking right over it, which I thought perfect. It was one of my favorite things I found about all bare knuckle boxing. And occasionally they wore a little bit of a cardboard breastplate. And all of these guys had these really crazy names. Like there was one guy called Mangiatesta, or the Eater of Heads. There was another guy called Matagate, which was Cat Killer. And my favorite name, which was when I named this drink, is I called it the Stramato, which in the Venetian dialect means completely crazy. So this is my ode to a long dead Venetian bridge fighter who Indy and company walked over his palace on the way to the knight's tomb. So that's the deal with that. And I believe I have on the second photo on this image, I actually have a picture of a painting that was taken to give you a sense. That's the bridge that Indy and Elsa are walking over. That's the bridge of San Barnaba in Venice.
So, folks, you don't just get a drink; you get a history lesson. Just so you know.
But of course, all that matters is how does it taste. And I think Dave is drinking it. So, Dave, how does it taste? Dave's on mute.
It tastes so. Yeah.
It tastes muted.
Yeah, it's a muted flavor. I love that amber hue to the drink. It's really good. And of course, it helps that I'm a big fan of all the ingredients you chose for this one. So another winner here. Am I the only one drinking this, by the way?
You are, Dave, because I wasn't able to get. Yeah, I'm not drinking at all right now because I'm still recovering from a stomach virus right now. So I haven't been able to touch any booze, if you can believe that.
Well, Aperol is supposed to help with that.
I, on the other hand, had blended a lot of Jewel pina colada mix with way too much Captain Morgan. Although, if anybody asks, it's a Slurpee.
All right. Well, thank you for creating that. Again, everyone, if you want to see the recipe for the drink, we're calling it the Venice. Is that what we're calling it?
No, I'm calling it the Stramato. After,
the Stramato.
Yeah, okay. The Stramato. After
you can find that at Review Cocktails. That's REVU Cocktails on Instagram, where you'll see all the drinks that Tom has created, not only for the Indiana Jones films, but also for the MCU review, the sister show to this particular series, all part of Caffeinated Comics on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. All right. Well, let's go in a little deeper now. Well, let's throw this out to the panel. I'll start with you, Dave. All right. So, is this the end of the series? I mean, is this really, would you say, the end of Indiana Jones's arc? That I mean, we will talk about the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and we're definitely going to see Dial of Destiny. But was this really where it should have ended?
Well, this seems to be the last movie that is universally enjoyed. I'll say that. I wanted to say no, but then at the same time, we just had this disaster of a trilogy of Star Wars films from Disney. So it's like, well, yeah, to me, the Star Wars saga, the Skywalker saga ends with Return of the Jedi, and there's no reason to continue after that. So yeah, if you want in your headcanon, if you say, I mean, let's face it, this movie literally ends with the characters riding off into the sunset, which is like the prototypical happy ending, right? So yeah, if you prefer to think that this was the last film of the saga and just ignore, and I'm saying this as someone who kind of likes Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls, then yeah, why not? Can't say definitively, but I get the argument for wanting to feel that way.
What do you think, John?
No. I mean, you can not like the fourth one, but it exists. I think it. The problem with Indiana Jones, and I think we've said this before, is that there's too many years in between where we have to make it in this overall story, and it isn't. It is Bond. It was supposed to be modeled on Bond, and it was supposed to be a movie every couple of years. And we said this multiple times. If we had gotten Indiana Jones movies every 2 to 3 years, we would be talking about them differently. We might not have even wanted Dial of Destiny because we may have moved on from it because we might have been satisfied. And at the end of the third film, when I saw it originally in 1989, I wasn't satisfied. I was like, wait, is that going to be it? Because I thought we were going to get more than 3 of these things. So right now, by saying it ends here, you're just ignoring one movie because the jury can is not out, but the jury's out on Dial of Destiny. And I think these are all one-offs. You can invent fan fiction that has a character arc throughout, but they weren't even designed to be that way. I don't think even Lucas and Spielberg sat down and said, okay, so where is Indy in his life? How is what happened to him before affected him? He's the same character in every movie, and the tone of each movie shifts it a little bit. He's a little bit darker in Temple of Doom, and he's a little bit lighter in this. But I don't think it was ever designed to be a trilogy. As Spielberg said, Lucas said he had ideas for 3 movies. He didn't. He had ideas for the character. And when the third one ended, it wasn't like, well, that was a great trilogy. It didn't tie anything up. All we really got was we resolved the artifact of the movie, and we resolved Indy's relationship with his father, which was introduced in that movie. We don't tie off anything that was lingering from the character from the other 2 movies. So you can talk about how much you don't like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull as much as you want, but I don't believe that Indiana Jones ended in 1989.
Tom?
I'm going to agree with John. This doesn't seem to be necessarily the end of the line, and I don't think it was ever intended to be necessarily the end of the line. I think it just happened to work out that way that we weren't going to see Indy again until Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I think it was just the circumstance. Harrison Ford went off and did other projects. Steven Spielberg went off and did other projects, and just kind of fell by the wayside. They are all one-off movies to some extent or another, and it's just a question of the timing. You could have done a movie with Harrison Ford in like 1994, 1995. Someone could have wrote that script and made a good indie movie at that time based off of some other artifact or in some other context. I think as he gets older and you get into the post World War II era. You get into the post colonial era. It gets a little trickier to write, but not impossible. As much as we've tended to rag on Crystal Skull. At least wasn't an idea, a germ of a plot that could have gone somewhere, even if the execution wasn't great. I think where you run into maybe problems is if you wait too long, maybe you run into difficulties with any other sequel series. We mentioned the Fast and Furious movies. Do they keep trying to one-up it? Does it keep trying to one-up itself over and over? Does it fall victim to some of the same problems that other franchises have? Maybe. We'll never know. But you could have done it. You certainly could have done at least one more good movie between now and when Harrison Ford is in his 80s. So, yeah, I'm going to agree with John. I think this was not necessarily the end.
I can't help but think, because if Indy was supposed to be Bond, Sean Connery eventually gave the role over to another actor, and hence that tradition started. I'm pretty sure that, Lucas was hoping at some point that they could go on from Harrison Ford, yes, the irony being that Lucas didn't even want Harrison Ford for this role. We discussed this back when we talked about Raiders. It was supposed to be Tom Selleck. It was supposed to be cast as Indiana Jones. If Indy was supposed to be an American Bond, and everyone has been trying to create the American version of James Bond time and time and time again, the closest we've come to that is Batman.
Yeah, and I know we've had this argument on Caffeinated Comics, but Indiana Jones was invented in this genre. He was invented as Harrison Ford. Both Bond and Batman are adaptations from print. So no matter who you put in that role, they're always going to be an adaptation of the source material. With Indiana Jones, the movies are the source material. And I think it's much harder to do. It's not impossible because Star Trek has given us 3 Mr. Spocks, and they've all been pretty good. But I think it's so much bigger a feat to put somebody else in those shoes when one person has created that character.
And Kathleen Kennedy has gone on record now saying that Indiana Jones is Harrison Ford, and that's it. No, there will be no more big screen Indy without Harrison Ford. So
I don't believe that.
Well, technically,
he's past Disney at this point.
Technically, we do have big screen Indy that's not Harrison Ford, and it's River Phoenix. And if River Phoenix doesn't pass away in 1993, tragically, do they make a Indiana Jones in 1918, 1920 with River Phoenix and say 1995, 1996?
That was Indiana Jones, Young Indiana Jones series.
That was the Young Indiana Jones series.
Phoenix was too much of a movie star to go and do. I think it was kind of a backdoor pilot at the beginning of Last Crusade.
Yeah.
And Lucas's whole idea of that these would be history lessons as a television series. I don't see River Phoenix becoming Indiana Jones. I feel like River Phoenix in this, the reason he's here is because he played Harrison Ford's son in The Mosquito Coast the year before and knew his mannerisms inside and out. And he was a strong, young, upcoming actor, from the late 80s, just the same way as Keanu Reeves or Johnny Depp. So he was personal. Why he has Kurt Cobain's hair in 1917. I will never come to a resolution about it.
If you read the novelization of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, you know that that Indy is living on an Indian reservation. He and his father are living on an Indian reservation. And I always thought of Indy in just being part of the group. That's why he had the. Also, did all the things that would make his father.
That's why he dyed his hair blonde.
Yeah, did all the things that would make his father crazy. Right? Indy was all the things that his father didn't care for.
Legit question as to how Henry Sr. got a handle on all of those manuscripts in the middle of nowhere in Utah in 1911.
Oh, I always figured Utah was a stopping point for them. He spent his whole life studying the Grail. And there was probably some shitty college in Utah that he was
Probably borrowing, and stealing to get your hands on those manuscripts. Those manuscripts are not easy to come by. I mean, unless you happen to be in Chicago and you can have a driver's license with an Illinois residency, and then you could go to the Newberry Library and read them for free.
Well, that's what a young Indy would do when he'd go to college at the University of Chicago, right?
Yeah. Well, that's true. Indy seems uninterested necessarily in medieval literature. Certainly not to the extent that Henry is interested in medieval literature. But when we can talk about that whole sequence of how it's not just a great action sequence, but it sets up the father-son dynamic right away. Indy comes in bursting excited. He's got the treasure. He just really wants to show it to his father. And he's just like, okay, I'm working, count to 10. And then he does that little mumbling thing. And then it's like in Greek. And it's like, okay, so he's that kind of dad. Who is not only going to tell him to count to 10.
When this came out, everybody turned to him, which made me happy because I already thought I was Indiana Jones. So finding out that his dad was my dad just underscored it. My dad owns that hat. His beard was that gray. He was a very fucking history teacher for 35 years. Now he's a Florida resident that listens to Fox News, but I don't know where that transition happened. But he was very professorial in that way. And that was one of the things I loved about this movie. And in fact, he's quoted that movie to me. He said his favorite line in that movie is, "You left just as you were becoming interesting." So that resonated to him. My favorite story about my dad, all he reads is history and philosophy. And one time he was introducing me to one of the other teachers in his school. And I was an adult at this point. And he said, "Well, this is my son, Jonathan." And the teacher went, oh, is he as big a reader as you, Jerry? And my dad went, "Yes, but of the wrong things."
Whoa.
Too many Marvel comics for Gerald Clarke. But that's why I always identified with this. And the Sean Connery's characterization, Dave, I want to turn to you for this. Is this the first time, maybe the only time, that we see Sean Connery as a character actor? Because he is not playing a leading man in this. He's playing a quirky professor who's bumbling, who mugs at the camera. I don't think I've ever seen him this vulnerable. I don't think I've ever seen him this soft, this off the cuff before. He's not the ultra confident Sean Connery. Even in Time Bandits, he's that ultra confident Sean Connery. Oh, Dave, you're muted.
Sorry, my dog was barking earlier. I think you might be right about that, which is why it makes it even more interesting of a casting. One, because again, it's James Bond being the father of Indy, but also because we're not used to seeing him in these types of roles, where he's not the leading, like you said, not the leading man.
And even later, he would go back to, things like Entrapment and the Avengers. He would go back to that mold.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe Spielberg is pulling it out of him. Maybe he wanted to tweak his own image. But this is probably my favorite Sean Connery performance.
He's incredibly likable in this.
Yeah.
The Bond is bubbling under the surface, though, too. You can see it.
We ignore all the problematic parts of Sean Connery when he comes on screen, and he just does his thing. Because yes, he and Harrison Ford have great chemistry. They have great chemistry as father and son. They have great chemistry as foils. Again, as even like an Abbott and Costello type thing going back and forth. The dialogue in this film is probably some of the snappiest dialogue in an Indiana Jones film, where it's all bing bang boom setup, hit your mark, joke, bam. One thing leads to another, So,
well, even the set pieces. I've always loved the way Spielberg builds an action sequence. And you really see it in Tintin. When I saw Tintin, that was a revelation to me. And not enough people have seen that, because that was Spielberg making an animated film, but it felt like Indiana Jones. And I was like, oh my God, this is the way he structures his action set pieces, is that this little thing will lead to this. And then there'll be a subplot. And he has all these subplots of inanimate objects. If you think of the perfect example, the beginning of Temple of Doom, there's all that chaos in Club Obi-Wan, but you always know where the diamond is, and you always know where the antidote is. And you see that and you see that in this, just the scene where they're tied up together. You know, when he drops the lighter and he blows on the lighter, and that starts the fire, and that leads into the fireplace, and then the fireplace leads to the secret door, which opens into the Nazi. It's like everything builds and builds and builds. And he's building that as if it's a bit. I mean, even the moving fireplace always reminds me of Young Frankenstein. It's that same bit of put the candle back. And he's playing with those kind of stacking visual bits in this. So Spielberg's doing the comedy as much as the actors are.
We will go more into Kingdom of the Crystal Skull on our next show, but the DNA of this film is all over Kingdom. The problem is that in Kingdom, the exposition feels like exposition, unlike in Last Crusade, where again everything just moves things along. Little bits in here. I'm guessing if the screenwriter for Kingdom had maybe trimmed maybe 20, 30 lines here and there, could have moved along a lot quicker.
There's an interesting detail in the exposition where we get that in that first scene with Donovan, where he's kidnapped to a fancy black tie party, and filling in little character details in that. I've always loved the part where we're getting all this information about the tablet, and then there's the book on the thing, and then Donovan gets pulled away for a second, and he comes back to Indy, and he sticks his finger into the glass of champagne and uses it to try to wipe a little bit of dust or debris off of the piece of sandstone, which, modern historians or archaeologists would look at that and just cry out in terror of like, what are you doing putting wine on that thing? But what it's communicating to the audience is he doesn't care about drinking the fancy champagne. For him, the champagne is just a way to get a closer look at the tablet so he can read the Latin text. So that's just a great little detail where they're able to tell you bits about character in the middle of giving you, the exposition.
Yeah, it's just like the auditorium scene in Raiders. Again, it's matching that formula of, you're getting as much Brody and Indy and the two G-men, their dispositions as much as you're getting the backstory of the Grail. And that's what you do. Exposition, the most important part of the story. It's literally the instruction manual to your plot. So the easier you can layer it in something else, the better. And you get a lot of that with character here.
I'd also like to comment before I forget that this is the first film where Indy actually gets to keep an artifact that he goes after. He loses the idol in Raiders as well as the Ark. He surrenders the Sankara stones back to the village in Temple of Doom. He'll lose across the coronado in the beginning, but then ultimately retrieve it, which really does give this film kind of a final chapter sort of feel, because it's kind of like Spielberg was saying, you know what, this is the last one. We're going to let Indy keep what he went after this time around.
Yeah, but not the Grail.
Yeah, no, that one I will get the key.
Oh, you kept it.
Yeah, I kept it, because it's...
Oh, look. There's my first communion poster.
Oh.
Literally, I drew my first communion banner. I drew the whole the chalice the way that it was done in Last Crusade.
Probably one of the better prop replicas I have. This one,
yeah, that's very nice.
Really nice one.
Yeah, the weatherness of it, and you know what? To jump ahead, assuming we are jumping ahead to that reminds me of the segment. Are there toys from this? There were no toys from this in 1989. No one even picked up the license. No one attempted anything. There was a feeling in the summer of 1989 that everyone was trying to kind of get away from Batman. They all knew Batman was going to take over the entire summer and the shelves were going to be filled with it. Neither Raiders nor the Temple of Doom figures sold very well, so they didn't attempt it. But there was a line in the 2008 line for the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull when they went back and did the other films. We talked about Temple of Doom. They did do 6 figures in that line. And they were very hard to find because at that point the line was already sunsetting. But this is the perfect time to do this. And I know we pushed this podcast back a few weeks, but Elliot, you're going to want your camera back on because what I just received this week are the new Indiana Jones Adventure series. From these are Marvel Legends styles. Of course, we talk a lot about Marvel Legends on the MCU review, but they did the Raiders of the Lost Ark set for a few weeks. Now, these two are one-offs. So first we have Professor Indy, who I am assuming is on Henry Jones Sr.'s body. They have not announced a Henry Jones Sr., but why wouldn't you? And he's holding the Grail Diary in the mailing package, which for this scale is pretty impressive. It's also the first Indy without a hat that they've sculpted, and the likeness is one of the best Harrison Ford likenesses I've seen. And even Han Solo is elusive. But even better, there is a Donovan figure who's a pretty dull figure. He's wearing kind of the safari jacket that he's wearing at the end of the film. However, if you want to use the alternate head, and this is all I've ever used, is you have the Chose Poorly Donovan, which is holding the ornate chalice and is a total zombified head.
Does the Indy come with a grail?
No.
So it comes with the diary, but not a grail.
Indy comes with the diary and the wrapped diary. So I'm assuming they haven't. I think they've announced it, but they haven't shown it. My guess is that will probably come with an Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade version or a Henry Jones Sr. version. Oh, Henry Jones Sr. will have to come with the briefcase and the umbrella. So it's possible that we might get Indy, who will be mostly reused except for the tie. And these are just becoming available now. You can find them at Target. I got them from Hasbro, but they arrived 2 days ago. So we're right on the precipice. And that leads me to another question. I've had this conversation with many people about this film, and I don't know if we brought it up before, but I want to ask each one of you, why do you think Indiana Jones wears a tie in this movie?
I will offer my idea. I mean, because I know that Harrison Ford
does.
Yeah, Harrison Ford is very much about input into the character, and he always wants to distinguish them. I'm like, okay, I remember when he signed up to do Blade Runner. Deckard was originally supposed to wear a fedora in Blade Runner because Blade Runner was a noir detective story. He was supposed to be more of a Sam Spade type. But he said, no, we're not. I'm not going to do that because our Indiana Jones already does that. I'm going to cut my hair. He's the one who came up with the idea of the short haircut. For Last Crusade, I can easily see Harrison Ford saying, you know what, I want to give him a tie. Or another thing could be, this could have been a Spielberg input because I swear there's some scenes, again, the boat chase going through the catacombs. I saw Bond. I kept seeing Bond, again, from Russia with Love and some other films. I swear it seemed like I could see Ford instead of Connery in certain shots where he was essentially saying, this is Bond's son. We're even making him look like James Bond in some of these action sequences. So then, of course, when he puts the jacket and the fedora back on, you got to keep the tie on, which, quite frankly, makes that my favorite of all the Indy outfits. The fedora, the jacket, the shirt, and the tie. And I'm happy to see they're bringing it back too for Dial of Destiny. Dave, am I wrong?
No, I think you're right about the Bond influence. My theory was that he wears it to look more professional in front of his dad, to try to impress his dad a little bit more. There's still that, obviously, we talked about this. The movie's a big part of that father-son relationship and sort of getting the approval of his father. So that could tie into it. No pun intended.
I think visually it just looks really cool. It's not just any tie. It's like they went with a straight jet black skinny tie to go up against that black leather jacket and dark brown fedora. I think visually, and in his shirt seems a little more like a pale gray. It's a little bit different than I think what. It's hard to say exactly what he's. I think I just remembered his shirt color being lighter. I'm used to seeing it just soiled.
As someone who frequents many indie cosplay boards, yes, the shirt goes through different changes through each film, and he has more of a military khaki look in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there are little slight differences between the shirts and the pants too. The pants are always different.
Right. And there's something into being it's like this is 1938.
Yeah.
So we're right on the cusp of World War II. There might be something to that there. Visually it's different, and visually it's a nice contrast with Henry keeps wearing the bow tie.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Indy does his initial lecture in the movie in a bow tie. He wears a 3-piece suit with a red bow tie, but he switches to the straight tie for the rest of the movie. So there's a bit of a contrast there with the more continuously, agonizingly professorial Henry versus the more slightly laid back Indy. Oh, John has the visual evidence here.
You're muted, John. So John, of course, is bringing out one of his sideshow figures, which I am incredibly jealous of here. John, you're muted.
John's telling us wonderful things that we're not getting because of the muting. It's like I know his description is just great because what he's pointing at is really cool.
So this is several customs put together, and I'll put this on the Facebook page for people that are listening to this in audio. But around the time of Crystal Skull, as we've mentioned many times, there was a lot of Indiana Jones product that had never been made before. So Sideshow made the Indiana Jones Senior, and the standard Indiana Jones, I bought pretty much every version they did. There were several Raiders. So this was an extra Raiders I had, which Metacom actually made. And when you mentioned the tie, I had to go on eBay and find the skinny black tie to complete this. The motorcycle is actually 21st Century Toys. It's just a period accurate motorcycle. They were a company that did, World War II figures, almost like the, if you remember that very depressing Steve Carell movie, Welcome to Marvel, where he's posing figures. It's like the companies that make those figures actually happen to make this exact model. And somebody had customized it with dust paint, which I thought was perfect. And also I bought this and put this together in 2007, and I have never dusted it. So it's just over the years, it's become more and more and more accurate. It's actually as old as my son at this point. The other detail, and this is just me showing off, is Henry is holding a Grail diary, which I bought on eBay, where every page has been filled out. So somebody went to the point of drawing the entire Grail diary in 1/6 scale.
That's impressive.
So this now rests in the glass detolfs downstairs.
I assume this is Indy and Henry on the way to the airport having retrieved the Grail diary.
Yes, this is Well, they haven't retrieved the Grail diary yet in the film. I'm cheating because I have one. But this is when they decide to go to Berlin.
Right.
The new Indy toys right now, there's the new we call Worlds of Adventure toys. It's their toys really aimed towards younger kids, and they came out with an Indy on a motorcycle with a sidecar, but there is no Henry Jones. I bought that particular toy in the hopes that they decide to come out with a scaled Henry Jones to go in the sidecar there.
Yeah, I never forgave them for the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull line when they did the 3 3/4 figures, the standard Star Wars size. They made the motorcycle, and then you could tell they flinched at the wrong moment because they just put a German soldier on it, and it had a hole for a sidecar that they never made. It's such an iconic moment. It's probably the most iconic look. I remember I remember Rolling Stone actually at the time of like the big movies of '89, and there were two pictures. There was a picture of Michael Keaton in the batsuit, and there was that exact picture of the two of them on the motorcycle. And literally the blurb was just Sean Connery will be in the next Indiana Jones.
That's a great action sequence.
That's neat, and that scene was a reshoot.
Really?
Originally, they don't go on the boat; they get on the motorcycle and they go away. And then Spielberg realized that they needed an action beat there. It was starting to slow down, so that's all shot on Skywalker Ranch.
What about the boat? What about the boat? But that's going to also set off a whole back and forth between Indy and his father as things go.
Yeah.
What did you do?
To reinforce, yes. There's a great reinforcing of the chivalry theme when they actually do a joust.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. The literal moment of a joust with another motorcyclist. Yeah, I do kind of love that theme of of like this like good knights and evil knights or something like that. It's something that has a bit of an appeal. Of this Crusade is a very loaded term. In 1989, when this movie came out, Crusade, this is before a lot of the more modern, more research scholarship into the Crusades happened. So the term has taken on different meaning with also various American wars in the Middle East. On top of that, I forget when John Riley Smith started writing his big books on the Crusades. And we didn't have as many Arabic as much Arabic source in translation as we have now. So we get a lot more of the other side. But for 1989, the idea of a crusade seemed undoubtedly something positive. And framing that in a positive sense as crusades, and also it's mocking of fascism as well, because the fascists, particularly I think about Franco in Spain, considered himself to be a knight errant crusader, things like that, and trying to associate themselves with that legacy. And here Spielberg is laying it all out and said, no, you're full of shit. You are not crusaders. Indy is the crusader. He is the true knight. And I will drop a literal knight of the First Crusade into this movie to tell him that he's chosen poorly. And that Indy is chosen.
And I'll do that
wisely.
an hour after Indy meets Hitler.
Right. An hour after
in this movie.
Right. In case you thought Spielberg was big on subtlety.
It's a Mel Brooks level of Nazism in this.
I mean, literally, we get the Nazis. I hate these guys.
Yeah. And that's another thing I felt about the course correction, which I mentioned in the beginning of, Lucas wanted to do, a major Jewish relic for the first film, a Hindu relic for the second, and then a Christian relic for the third. But after Temple of Doom was, the oddity it really is out of the others, it was like, let's fight the Nazis again. Let's have the MacGuffins, let's have the love interest, let's have these jokes, let's have these set pieces, let's trade the truck for a tank, and certainly Nazis are part of that, because even with the way he says Nazis, I hate these guys, he's reminding the audience is like, remember the first film, we're gonna do a lot of that again.
And we get an interesting new dynamic with the love interest. Elsa, who is introduced first kind of as an equal to Indy. She's supposedly another, historian and, archaeologist in her own right. But the twist being that she will ultimately betray him. Mind you, Elsa isn't, yes, she works with the Nazis, but she doesn't consider herself to be a Nazi.
She's a Nazi.
Yeah, I guess. She's a Nazi.
Look at the way she dresses at the end.
Look, she was just hanging out with the wrong crowd. Okay, she was hanging out, with.
She was only following orders. That's what you're saying?
38. I think we may be at or near post-Anschluss at this moment. So at the moment that Captain Von Trapp has already gone over the mountains, she's the one who stayed behind.
Yeah. All right. There we go. Well, so we have the whole bit with again a new take on the romantic interest, which then by the time Kingdom of the Crystal Skull comes around, they have to reset it and then bring back Marion. We're already talking about Crystal Skull with this because again, I'm going to hammer this on the next show when we talk about Crystal Skull. There is so much that the previous Indy movies do that it happened just as much in Crystal Skull. People bitch about it there, but they don't bitch about it here.
It's not about ideas; it's about execution.
I guess, but Last Crusade. I mean, again, Indy's on a boat that's getting chopped up by a giant propeller on an ocean liner, and the thing doesn't sink from the get-go.
Well, there's a plane that hits a tunnel, loses both its wings, and manages to skate past the car. There's enough room in that tunnel. There's not enough room in the tunnel for the plane and the wings, but there's room for the fuselage and another car. And it's skidding faster than the car at full drive.
Which, by the way, has been commemorated in the latest Lego set. You can buy the Indiana Jones Last Crusade Lego set with the Indy and Henry in the car that they drove off in, and then you have the plane and the little German pilot that goes in said plane. I think was with Crystal Skull they came out with the motorcycle and did that. I wish.
Yeah, Lego, like most companies, did a line in 2008 on all the films to build up to Crystal Skull. Then everything went dormant. Lego is now, whereas Hasbro's going back and doing this new scale that they didn't do in 2008. Lego is redoing sets they've done before with more detail, and that's torturing me because I have the old sets, but I believe I have all the old sets complete. But by complete, I mean I have a bin of gray bricks and a book.
I have it's called the Tomb Escape, I forget, but it's actually the Well of the Souls Lego set. I bought that one. I'm tempted to buy that plane and car set with Henry Jones Sr. and Indy, just in case I can track down a sidecar, a Lego, motorcycle and sidecar.
I do have the sidecar from that original set. Yeah. I'm tempted to buy that jungle set with the rolling boulder.
Yeah.
That looks just beautifully sophisticated. But in my head, I'm like 6 months later, it's a slightly larger pile of bricks.
So that's beyond me how you could do that. That would drive me nuts.
No, it did. Well, they're in the kids' rooms because I'm like, here, you have the Legos, and then just every few months I think, man, I got the whole Simpsons house in there. I have a Death Star in there.
Do you have the instructions on how to put those babies together?
Yeah, I kept most of the books, but I tried to rebuild one, and because there's so many bricks from so many sets, it's hours to find the right piece.
Right.
So technically, you could do it. Technically, you could count all the grains of sand on a beach. You use a preacher reference.
Real quick, before we get too far to the end, from Ash Williams, Joe Biden, future drink, muted barking dogs, because both Dave and I have been dealing with our dogs barking in the background, having to mute ourselves. Tom, if you want to come up with the muted barking dogs, we can feature that.
I may have to do the name for the that might have to be the name for Dial of Destiny, because I already have a vague idea of what I'm going to be in the woodwork on this Crystal Skull one. I've got ideas, and I may have gone. There may be Amazon purchases in order to make this happen, but I may be deep in the weeds. I've just horrible ideas, or just trying to make clear pebble ice. Oh boy, I may be deep in the weeds on that one.
How about just the crystal skull-shaped ice cubes? Just, make it easy on yourself there.
How about just Crystal Head vodka? That on ice.
And make Dan Aykroyd very happy.
The rest of the week off.
No, it's gotta be. I have an idea for doing a clarified Peruvian pisco sour, and then serve it on making a bunch of clear ice. There's ice with no bubbles in it, crushing it in a Lewis bag. So this way I have pebble ice like for tiki ice, and then clarifying the cocktail, adding a small amount of blue food coloring to it, and then pouring it over this clear pebble ice in a skull-shaped glass.
I've got those. I have skull-shaped glasses. So, yeah. I'm there at least. I have, of all the things you said, one thing I'm not going to have to track down.
This is called getting into the weeds. I've wandered off the path.
Anyway. What are the things about Last Crusade that I really enjoyed? I mean, because there's very little that I don't enjoy. Even over the years, I've come to terms with Indy's sort of, and you talked about this before, John, that the Indy movies really aren't so much a trilogy because there's no real character arc going on that's even closed off. Because by the time you get to Last Crusade, even though this is a true sequel, Temple of Doom was a prequel. We somehow, Indy, when he's 13, says it belongs in a museum. But by 1935, he's Mr. Fortune and Glory. And then by 1938, he's back to it belongs in a museum. So along the way, his motivations just keep seeming to change. Like, is that a natural progression of a character, or is this just inconsistency on the part of writers?
Inconsistency. I think it is. Like, we retcon, he was younger then and he was in a darker place, and it's like you can retcon it pretty easily, but it's like but really, what is Indy's motivation? Like, why, especially now that we're in this point where museums are have been seen lately as thieves and destroyers of culture. Like, what is Indy's noble purpose by it belongs in a museum? And is Fortune and Glory him just selling things to a museum?
Well,
I'm sorry. That was one of the things that I got from the beginning of Last Crusade, where you finally go, oh, wait a minute. How does Indy really make a living doing what he's doing? Oh yeah, every time he retrieves something, he gets an honorarium. Yeah. He gets a nice fat check.
He doesn't quit his day job. And one of my favorite moments, we haven't touched on this, was he's terrible at his day job.
Yes.
It's all the same beautiful women from Raiders, but they're all pissed off because it's the end of the semester.
The end of the semester, he's supposed to be meeting with students and grading papers and answering phone calls, but he decides, you know what? I'm going to go for a walk.
I'm going to jump out the window.
Yeah, he goes out the window. What does he do? He gets kidnapped at that point. And then after he gets kidnapped, goes on another trip. The dude just came back from a trip.
His TA is so swamped.
It's like, come on, man. And then, of course, you'll have that whole little speech that Indy gives in the beginning about how 90% of archaeology takes place in the library. There are no maps to hidden treasure, and X never, ever marks the spot. And
he's contradicted.
And yes, it does mark the spot when it's in a library.
Right.
So everybody wins.
So he did not technically contradict himself. But as far as what his purpose is in this movie, it is to go on a Grail quest. It is to
well, not even. He says to Kazim, he's like, I'm not after the glory of the Grail. I'm trying to find my father.
No, that's the way it is in the beginning, and it is kind of a meeting in the middle because his father is all about the quest
Yeah.
at any cost.
And well, it's all about keeping it out of the hands of the Nazis. It's
Right,
not
and
about
keeping
getting
it-
it for themselves,
Right.
which is why
And
they're able to give it up, and Elsa
which is
is not.
and he does go and appreciating he relies on the work that his father did for years and years and years and years. The diary is a more of a symbol of a kind of accumulated knowledge and an appreciation for accumulated knowledge because he's reading the diary for all the little hints the penitent man will pass. He will pass in the name of the word, a leap from the lion's mouth. As he's going through this final challenge, it's this accumulated knowledge, particularly in a movie we have a literal book burning. And it's one thing I thought of earlier. If we want it, when we see the James Bond erupt out of Sean Connery, who's been playing this character actor this whole movie, and then all of a sudden in the tank we get full Bond when he's getting slapped by that general, and then it's like it tells me that goose-stepping morons like yourself should try reading books instead of burning them. And it's like, fuck, that's good. Like it's like right there. It's like he's still got his fastball. It's like perfect.
Oh, he had a look that could kill. Oh, he definitely had a look that could kill. Speaking of diary, I meant to show this one off too. The Grail diary, which there are many replicas out there, but I got this one off of Amazon. Not the best. I'll be honest. The cover's a little too light for my taste, but it comes with a ton of inserts. And the only thing it does not have is the tablet rubbing. Some folks out there make some really good Grail diary replicas. So I'm looking forward to getting my own Dial of Destiny when that baby hits. Anyone out there got a line on a decent Shankara stone?
I've seen some on Etsy that light up.
Yeah, the ones that Disney offers, they no longer offer on Shop Disney. They offer at the stores. You have to be at the parks, and but they are the ones that just light up. They don't have the lines on them. So that's it. But Tom, to your point, yeah, Sean Connery, yeah, brought it back. That look, it's like, yikes. You call this archaeology? It's like the movie sends up everything. I mean, it recognizes that, you know what? Indy is not the best archaeologist. And that's not where really archaeology is. But hey, it's an action movie, and
Yes.
that's the background.
One of the things that I was watching it again as an adult, who has a master's degree in history, when he turns over the casket and the body just tumbles out, I was like, oh, just the pain of all of that DNA evidence, and you could find evidence in like the teeth for like what the knight's diet was, and maybe there's some remnants of the stomach contents. It's like modern archaeologists could do so much with that one corpse. Like, and there's a full set of intact, pristine 12th century chainmail that's just there. Like, there's just so much stuff. Like that.
Indy desecrates a guy's body to make a torch out of his femur. You know, I mean, come on.
That's also an accessory with the action figure.
All right.
That's a good one. Well, we get the great Raiders reference in that scene too.
That was my one bit that I do tend to get a tad annoyed, because if you think that Last Crusade is the last of Indy movies, yes, making a callback to Raiders, fine, but there will be another callback to Raiders in Crystal Skull. And how much you want to bet there's going to be another callback to Raiders in Dial of Destiny?
Probably be a callback to all four of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hear this one. I hear Dial of Destiny has callbacks to all the films. Tom Feaster, who was our show on the very first Top Men, chimes in by saying, Last Crusade was the worst thing that happened to Indiana Jones. I wonder why, Tom. Tell us why, please. And if, of course, if you have comments,
we booked him.
Yeah, I try to get Tom's been busy with deadlines. That's what happens when you're an Eisner-nominated comic book creator. But the whole thing with Indy, yeah, there are. We said at the top of the show that, you know, Dave, you said that this movie is probably like most universally liked. Actually, not really. I know a fair number of Indiana Jones fans who kind of don't like this one because it leans too heavily into the comedy.
No, I didn't say it was the most universally liked. I said it's the last one that was probably
most, universally
compared
liked.
to Crystal Skull. But yeah,
or even Temple of Doom. Yeah, even Temple of Doom still has a lot of, we have someone on this very show who did nothing but crap on Temple of Doom whenever I let him talk on the mic. And I don't know if I should. I might mute. So this one, there are some folks who aren't crazy about Last Crusade, but I think every indie movie, they're all different. I mean, they really are. You're never going to recapture what Raiders was. And then even so, Indy is not as fully developed a character in Raiders as he is in the later films. I mean, you can tell Harrison Ford gets more and more comfortable in the skin of that character with each successive film. And he likes, I think the reason he loved Indy so much more than Han Solo is because he was able to bring more layers to Indy than he was able to bring to Han Solo. Oh, here we go. And I know, I think that, Tom, I know where you're coming from on this one. Last Crusade sacrifices long-established characters for dumb jokes. Marcus being turned kind of made into kind of a doddering old man, you know? What does he say at the beginning of Raiders when he talks to Indy about going after the Ark? He goes, if I were younger, I'd go after it myself. You know, you want to believe that Marcus was, back in his day, someone like Indy who went after these types of relics. But in the end, it's just Marcus, blowing smoke. There's no way he would ever go after the Ark because he doesn't have the level of skill that Indy has. And Salah, what's Salah there for? Kind of like to get Marcus, lose Marcus, then get supplies, lose supplies, steal some camels, make a couple jokes, just keep setting up different things. That's why there are a fair amount of Indy fans who they're not fans of Last Crusade just because of that. Lean too much into the comedy.
I still love Marcus asking anyone if anyone can speak ancient Greek. It was like counterpoint. Marcus asking if anyone speaks ancient Greek is just hilarious, especially where he is. Asking if someone speaks Greek is just outstanding.
Tom should be on the show because he's chiming in again. Indy wouldn't surround himself with morons and fools. Lives are on the line.
Anyone ever worked in an academic environment?
You know what? You don't go to war with the army you want. You go with the war with the army you have.
Admittedly, Short Round would have been of much more effective assistance in this movie than Marcus, the way Marcus is portrayed.
Yeah, that is true. And I will say that was the one thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But as the movie went, he did have the great, again, also Denholm Elliott, totally unappreciated for his comedic chops. He was hilarious. He was just hilarious. We're going up on the hour and a half mark. I feel like I've been dominating the conversation up to here. Any other thoughts before we go into the home stretch? Dave?
I was going to say, to Tom's point about how you see that flash of Bond come out of Connery. He had only last played Bond 6 years prior to this in Never Say Never Again, so he's not that far removed from the end of his time as Bond, if you consider that a Bond movie, which I do. And he's also, didn't we discuss this, Elliot, in real life, isn't Connery, wasn't he only like 12 years older than
Ford? Yes. Yeah. I'll tell you, the only thing that keeps Never Say Never Again from being a real Bond film is the music.
Yeah, the music's terrible.
The music is terrible.
You need the gun barrel at the beginning. That's the indicator of a Bond movie.
And just really the Bond type score, like the John Barry score, the themes going through. They courted John Barry to do the score to that film, but he turned it down out of loyalty to Eon, to Cubby Broccoli, and the official Bond series. So I admire his loyalty, but it's also hard not to think about how much better that movie would have been with a real Bond sounding score to it. I mean, I liked it. I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought I would. It's a really cool looking film. And yeah, Sean Connery looks like a badass in it. That scene of him in the black tuxedo on the black motorcycle with everything. That's badass. That's, of course, Irving Kershner, who would direct Empire Strikes Back. Probably one of the most visually gifted of the Bond, if you want to call him a Bond director, even though this isn't, official.
Well, at least up until that point. And then you get into like the Daniel Craig era where they're getting Sam Mendes and those guys. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you're right. John.
No, I think I've covered it. As I said, this is a fun movie. It's got nothing wrong with it, but it leans very heavily into my flawed Indy sequel theory. Is that Raiders is such a perfect balance of all the different genres that to top it, each one of them leaned a little too hard into a genre. When we talked about Temple of Doom, it was too much horror. This is too much comedy, but people love comedy, so it makes it just more lovable. And of course, the Crystal Skull will be too much sci-fi, and I don't know what Dial of Destiny will be too much, but maybe it'll be too much screen time.
Too much time travel. Oh, real quick, Tom chimes in. When did The Rock come out? When we saw
96, I think. I think it was the year after GoldenEye.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's canonically a Bond movie in my head as well.
So I mean, but this was
the idea of a Bond movie with Nicolas Cage in it.
I know the timing is off, but I just have a problem with the fact that The Rock doesn't star The Rock.
To me, The Rock will always be Don Morocco.
But it's like naming an action movie Robert Downey Jr.
or RDJ. I mean, they already have an RRR. They're going to come out. They can do that.
Is it a dog movie?
John can't hear me yelling at him. No, Tom. No, John cannot hear you.
Sorry. I want to.
Well,
what are you doing for Crystal Skull, Tom?
Well, when we come back for Crystal Skull, we will be rejoined by our good friend John Singh, who was a publicist for Lucasfilm at the time and had the unenviable task of putting together the PR blitz for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which is way different right now than Dial of Destiny. You see there's a big difference between how the two are were promoted to how the first one's being promoted. And we'll chew on that when we get to it. All right. Final thoughts before we leave. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Tell us what you didn't get in while we were talking. Tom, I know you've always got something that you forget to get in.
Yes. So, something that I don't think we necessarily talked about, and we didn't necessarily talk about is we didn't talk about the knight. How I don't know how he chose wisely, he chose poorly. How that kind of wound up in the kind of popular discourse now, 30 years after the movie came out. But that whole last sequence is, if we talk about horror, there's that decomposing face. Like, I wasn't able to watch that as a kid. Like, I would, yes, exactly that. That is giving me. I didn't even see that face until I was in like my 30s, because I would always turn away from the screen every time it came on. I knew what it was. That was like scary. That was like a last a minute thing, and there's that little detail where Indy gets like 14 seconds with the knight just to have a little conversation, and he's like he's in a hurry. He's like trying to figure out these things, and the knight is trying to literally pass the sword onto him as a recognition of Indiana Jones as seemingly like a successor or something like that. There's something kind of very sweet in that moment. Of not quite torch passing, and then the going through the sequences of all the different cups and things like that. And I was like, well, there's that little reminder. There's the cup of the carpenter. And one thing I always noticed over the years, even though the outside is very burnished, the inside is bright, brilliant brass. Yep, exactly that. As the interior is bright and brilliant. There's some theological implications to that, but that's just a very well written sequence. The little nod, the little glance sideways from Elsa to Indy, where you wonder, is she deliberately giving him the wrong chalice? Yeah, definitely.
She knew. Yeah, that's why she said it would not be made of gold.
Right.
You're talking, Tom, about the knight. Actually, in that there's a bit that's touched on in the sequel that Dark Horse will do, the comic book sequel, Indiana Jones and the Spear of Destiny, which reunites Indy and Henry Jones. And as it picks up right at the end of Last Crusade, and in that scene when they're riding off into the sunset, and Henry Jones Sr. says, I should have, he's thinking, I should have stayed behind to be the Grail Knight. Like, he thought his entire quest was supposed to lead him to be the next guardian of the Grail, but he doesn't. He leaves because he gives up that particular obsession now. Because why? He's reunited with his son, right?
There's that detail in that we didn't discuss the Spear of Longinus, because that's also part of the First Crusade. Is supposedly the Knights of the First Crusade, while they were besieged at the city of Antioch, supposedly when they were starving on the brink of collapse, some knight had a vision that he knew where the Spear of Destiny was supposedly buried somewhere around, and so he wanders around. Oh, I think it's here. And he has all the other knights start digging this hole in the ground, and they're not finding anything. And then he hops in finally and starts digging this hole, and he pulls out this old spearhead, which is like, come on, like, this site has been occupied for thousands of years. Like, you could find a spearhead there. And it's like, here it is. It's the Spear of Destiny. And they are inspired to go out and win the battle or something like that, so the crusade can go on. And it's just like, and there's like mockery when the Byzantines are reading this discussion and from Constantinople. It's like, this is ridiculous. There's no way that idiot found the actual Spear of Destiny. The real Spear of Destiny is in the Church of the Holy Wisdom here in Constantinople. This is ridiculous. So it's like, we clearly have the real one. So,
and apparently that's actually what Indy is going after in the beginning of Dial of Destiny. So it starts with the Spear of Destiny and the Dial of Destiny.
There's like 8 Spears of Destiny out there. Just how, like, if you like took all the pieces of the True Cross and put them together, it would be like it would fill an entire room.
Would it bring Jesus back? Is that what you need to do to bring Jesus back?
No, it is you do not tell Jesus what to do.
The Jesus. Do not tell the Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. You don't fuck with the Jesus.
Oh man.
It would be funny. It would be hilarious to me on some level. Some of these idiots tried to bring Jesus back, and he actually shows up, and it's like, the fuck is your problem? It's like, it's like, No, I'll do it in my own time, assholes.
I think that's biblically correct. Yes, that is theologically accurate. All right. Well, and Tom Feaster. Never heard of Crystal Skull. That's fine. We won't have him on that show. All right. Well, I've had fun with this. Again, right now it's pretty much getting ready, for the last Indy movie to come out, which by now, if I look at the calendar, by the time y'all see this, it's going to be a month from today, about 30 days. Once this audio podcast goes up on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network, it'll be about just under 30 days. And we're going to see what the future holds for Indiana Jones. And on the 31st of May, all the Indiana Jones movies, as well as the entirety of the Young Indiana Jones Adventures, will be made available on Disney Plus. So you know what that means, guys. Yes, the Young Indiana Jones Adventures will be the topic of a future Top Men episode. So we will be talking about it, especially since it is referenced in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, hence making it canon. So I'm going to have to go with that. What do you think about that, John?
I'm not watching all of them again.
Wait, don't you have them all on
I
DVD?
bought the DVDs when Crystal Skull came out, and I don't think I ever finished them. They're very slow.
They are quite slow. But
it also took us 2 months to get to Last Crusade.
That's true. But we're not going to talk about all the episodes. I mean, we'll just talk about the series in general. But one fun thing, if you have not seen them when it comes when it's available on Disney Plus, you will want to see Indiana Jones and the Young Indiana Jones and the Phantom Train of Doom, which co-stars Paul Freeman, Locke from Raiders, who goes from being Indy's enemy in Raiders of the Lost Ark to actually playing a mentor to young Indiana Jones in this particular episode. He's the one.
Before you watch that, you're going to want to watch Indiana Jones and the Birth of the Blues, which is the only episode to feature Harrison Ford.
Well,
who is wearing his fugitive beard as Indiana Jones for the whole, because he couldn't shave during the shoot.
I think, and they filmed that particular sequence like outside his house over in Jackson Hole. Like they went there and they decided, okay, let's do a whole bit. They shot it like in a weekend, something like that.
Yeah, ratings weren't good. Yeah. That's why.
Because everyone wanted Raiders of the Lost Ark
on Deep Space Nine kind of thing.
Yeah, they wanted action adventure, and again, Lucas wanted to create an educational show, but he essentially turned Indy into Forrest Gump, where Indiana Jones is like at every freaking historical event of the 20th century. So, all right. With that, I will bid all adieu our friends, our viewers here on the Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch pages. Before we go, tell us, gentlemen, where we can find you on the socials. Dave.
I am on Instagram at Pinto_Noir.
Why do we want to follow you?
I share lots of photos of my adorable goblin of a dog.
He is an adorable goblin.
So nice this weekend. My wife and I spent a lot of time hanging out on our balcony, and we were wary of how he would react to being out there because we're only on the second floor, so even if he jumped, he probably wouldn't do too much damage to himself. But he knows his boundaries and limits, so he enjoyed just being up there and looking at every bike and car and person that walked by. So it was a perfect weekend to do that.
That's great. Tom.
You can find me at REVU Cocktails on the Instagram app, where I share photos and recipes of all the drinks for the Top Men and Indiana Jones podcast and for the MCU review, including also any bonus classic or made-up cocktails that I decide to make in the interim. Next up, I've got plans and ideas coming up for the next MCU review for Spider-Man Far From Home. So I look forward to sharing that with everyone.
Yeah, it should be the next one. John.
If you are not already listening to this as an audio podcast of Caffeinated Comics, you can listen to Caffeinated Comics every week anywhere you get podcasts. And fortunately, Memorial Month is over on Caffeinated Comics. I am no longer rerunning episodes of Friends who have passed away. So the three of you have to stay alive. But we'll be covering all the news that's fit to geek. The other good news is I finally saw Guardians of the Galaxy 3. So there will be no more. I wanted to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but here's an old episode from somebody who suddenly passed away.
John, I do want to say really sincerest condolences to you. I know this has been a hard few weeks for you.
Well, I appreciate it. And honestly, the podcast has been a real help, even for myself, re-listening to both Ron Zabraki, who was a guest on the show, and Bill Monroe, who was such a big part of Caffeinated Comics. And we really should have had him on Top Men. He was way behind on the MCU review, but he would have had a lot to say about Indiana Jones.
And also, and it was also your birthday.
It was after all that. So I bought myself the Indiana Jones retro set. That's what I did.
Oh, there you go.
And I know you have one for me, but this card's all jacked up.
All right. Well, and I am Elliott Serrano on all the socials with 2 L's, 2 T's, and 2 R's. As John said, you can catch us on the MCU Review Facebook page, Top Man and Indiana Jones podcast page. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, though I don't. Twitter has become a right-wing propaganda platform, so I deleted the app off my phone. There's really no point in being there anymore. But everywhere else, you can find me. You can find us. When we come back next time, yes, we will be talking about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Or you'll find us over on the MCU review page where we will be talking about Spider-Man No Way Home. We want to lighten things up. This has been a rough few weeks. So let's lighten it up. Hope for a much better summer ahead. So for myself, for Tom, Dave, and John, thank you all for watching us here on Top Men and Indiana Jones podcast. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for viewing. Please like us, share, subscribe, tell your friends about us, pass us along, listen to us on the Radio Mistress Podcast Network, and we will see you again soon.